My name is Jeff Byron, and the title of this panel is Utility of the Future, the Evolution of the Electric Power Industry. I'll start off with a few introductory remarks, if you will, gentlemen. In keeping with the intent of the Stanford Precourt Energy Efficiency Center's Silicon Valley Energy Summit, we want to try and understand all the threats and trends and opportunities in energy here and around the world. So the new technologies, the services that everyone talks about, increased customer-owned renewable generation, they're all having an impact on the traditional electric utility model. If you throw in energy efficiency, storage, demand response, smart grid technologies, community choice aggregation, and home energy management systems, there's a lot of new opportunities for customer choice and potential disruption for the traditional monopoly utility. For example, SolarCity and Tesla have combined batteries with PV panels for a batteries as a service for commercial business customers. Nissan has a vehicle-to-building solution that brings electric vehicles into buildings' power distribution system to perform smart charging and discharging. Of course, there's lower-cost PVs, photovoltaic. We have the one and only PV on our panel. Customer leasing models, regulatory policy changes.
That's a very good punt. That's a good punt.
Nobody saw that coming.
Policy changes such as feed-in tariffs, net energy metering. A lot of changes are taking place. And utilities, perhaps particularly investor-owned utilities, may feel threatened with their established monopoly business models. And there is cause for concern. Many of you may not know that while Europe has embraced customer-owned renewable energy, the continent's 20 largest utilities have lost nearly €500 billion in the market since 2008. And some utilities are responding defensively to grid modernization and technology and service innovations. Some are attempting to meet those customer needs and try and find a successful business model. So the primary question for this panel is, what do the new opportunities for customers and the challenges for incumbent utilities mean for the electric power industry? With me this afternoon, I have President Mike Peavy. I believe sometimes later this year, he's going to become the longest-serving CPUC commissioner and president.
What an honor.
And the place has been around a little longer than he has.
Almost.
Yeah, like almost. 105 years, I think. You know, I've known President Peavy for a number of years, and I can tell you, no one is more dedicated to public service and has been working tirelessly to implement California's aggressive energy policies. The only person I can think of that might eclipse him is his wife. Many people don't know.
I agree with that.
Many people don't know that Senator...
I know she's listening somewhere.
That's right. Senator Carol Liu has been, she will have served 18 years, I think, in the Assembly and the Senate. And when I was a California Energy Commissioner, I certainly enjoyed working with President Peavy, in part because he never shied away from controversy or the tough issues. Also with us is Rick Needham, the Director of Energy and Sustainability at Google, who has a gaggle of degrees in technology and business. And I also understand, Rick, that you worked at the lab of one of my heroes, Dean Kamen. And you're going to have to explain to us at some point how an aerospace engineer ends up working in a submarine for 8 years. But we'll cover that some other time. Of course, he's doing a lot of transformative initiatives in energy at a data company, or at least at what I think of as a data company. And Joe Scalise is with us. Joe is the partner, he's a partner at Bain Consulting and head of the North America Utilities Practice. Joseph's presentation at an en banc hearing that President Peavy chaired at the PUC last fall on the future business models for utilities really gave us the idea for this panel. I don't know much about Joe, but I do know, just looking at him, that he has all of his fingers, which means he's not that other Joe Scalise up in Chicago.
True,
Yeah, you probably know who I'm talking about.
I do.
Yep. And some of you may note who's not on this panel, that we don't have a utility individual, and part of it is the panel is full. We have a lot of expertise here, and I really want to get outside the box of that monopoly thinking as much as possible. So I guarantee you with this panel, you will not miss not having a utility person. Let's get started. Gentlemen, President Peavy, at that en banc hearing I mentioned, you said the following, if I may quote, "The PUC will have to tackle how the growth of distributed energy resources will impact utilities, recovering their costs from a declining pool of customers. And it will have to help promote customer engagement as we continue to create policies and programs that can only be successful if customers make informed choices. It will be important for the PUC and utilities to keep up with and take advantage of the incredible pace of technology innovation." So, President Peavy, what do you see as those main challenges that are facing investor-owned utilities?
Well, it's to do just the thing I said there. But, I mean, let me set the stage a little bit here, a little differently. We talk about the future of the utilities, but it's not, the utilities aren't a monolith. I mean, utilities differ radically all across the United States. California, there's one kind of model, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But if you go to the South or the Midwest, the vertically integrated utility, by and large, still exists. If you go to the New England states, it's similar to California. New York now is stepping out and trying to address the utility of the future perhaps more aggressively than any of the other states, at least in terms of a policy focus at all. But just talk a moment about California. The idea that there is some radical change going on here, I think, can be overstated. Yes, I think this industry is changing. I think it's changing at a faster pace, perhaps, than it anticipated changing, or in California, or would wish to change. I think that part is true. But I've been around long enough, as you can probably tell by the color of my hair, to remember when PURPA was created, but that was going to be the end of this utility model. The vertically integrated utility is going to go away because generation was now all going to be done by independent power. Well, that hasn't happened, and in this state, we've got kind of a mixture. Then we had this state, we went through the great issue about competition. We opened things up in 1998, and within a couple of years, believe it or not, companies like Edison and PG&E lost about 13% of their customer load to what was called at that time direct access. And that still exists in California to some extent. The energy crisis had ended, and then it came back again with some legislation in Sacramento a few years ago. Think of that. In the space of a year or so, Edison and PG&E lost about 13% of their load. And then think of what's happened. We hear all this about net energy metering, and it's about 1% of the load is now left because it's not the same mixture. And there's a lot of hype about how net energy metering is going to destroy the industry in California. But in fact, compared to what happened in direct access, I think it's rather modest. Now, after saying that, however, I do think that there are a lot of new things going on that are eroding the customer base of the utilities in a way and at a pace perhaps faster than we would have foreseen. It's not just the solar industry, it's a solar combination of solar and a company like Solar City that's come up with a very clever business model and then now wants to get into the battery storage area. It is the companies like Rick has here, or Google buying a company like Next for billions of dollars. My God, I never thought it would see that kind of money going out for. But these two do give customers much more fundamental choices and decision-making as customers. That is going to, I think, is coming now at a pace faster than we would have anticipated a few years ago. Although again, when you look at the sheer size of the utility structure in California, the erosion or change is not that dramatic. What is the future in store? I think it's, I don't want to steal Joe's pitch here, but he and I more or less agree that it's the probably distribution and transmission company model with a tremendous amount of individual choice by customers, not just in terms of solar panels, but who their providers are, right down to things like community choice aggregation and so forth. So you're seeing a ferment here in this state, but this is not happening universally across the United States at all. And so one has to be careful in designing and writing RIP over the utility business model, even in California. I think that the model will continue with permutations and alterations that I think utility executives are quite aware of, will continue to function for many years in the future.
Rick, would you like to add to that, or how do you see it? Are utilities keeping up with all the innovations that are taking place?
Well, I think one thing is that the pace of technology innovation, as we all know here, is rapid and almost accelerating, and probably in some industries or sectors, it really is coming into play much more rapidly than people may have expected. So I think, distributed generation and solar PV is certainly one area of technology innovation where I think if you asked people a decade ago where are solar PV prices going to be, they would never have guessed that they'd be as low as they are now. I mean, in distributed generation, there's many sources of distributed generation. It could be, it could be a fuel cell in someone's basement or a reciprocating engine, but solar PV has inherent attributes. Very easily distributed, doesn't require any fuel source, it's just free, it sits on your rooftop, you've got space to put it. And the fact that solar panel prices have come down like 80% in 5 years, and just over the last 2 years, the installed cost has come down by 1/3. And most industries would kill to have some of the cost reductions here. And I think as we think about other technology innovations, so that's one, that's on the generation side, which is distributed generation, you can put it on someone's rooftop. But there's a lot of other innovations that have happened because of now ubiquitous communications, because of low-cost power electronics, device innovations, things that, as a result of Moore's Law, have become smaller, and then through design have become these really beautiful devices. So you mentioned Nest. I think there's technology that's happening that allows customers of electricity to have things that they maybe hadn't had as much before. There's convenience, there's comfort, there's the opportunity to control their own destiny, some resiliency. But at the end of the day, with the electricity market is basically, it's a commodity market. You're buying kilowatt hours at some price. So cost is critical. And the fact that solar PV has come down so dramatically in cost has really what's been enabled this large growth in the market. I think solar PV now distributed is somewhere on the order of 6 gigawatts and is predicted to grow 6 times that in 6 years. 6 times in 6 years by 2020 or so. That's amazing. That's a huge growth, and I think that's why utilities, although net energy metering is really only a very small portion, so it's much less than the 13% that may have happened because of deregulation before of load they lost. I think they can see that this technology has now gotten to a point where there is grid parity in many of the locations. So in the US, like Hawaii and California are there, but in Europe, 4 of the 5 largest areas, sectors in Europe are at kind of cost parity on solar. So this is something that's coming, but it's going to require careful integration into the system, management. You'll need some of those load side devices to help enable greater penetration of things like solar and wind. So we think there's one thing I think I would leave this group with is the pace of technology innovation is fast and is continuing to accelerate. And within this space, I think there's opportunity, not just for technology companies, but opportunities for utilities to really take advantage of some of those things and help transition or adapt their business models to participate in that too. Empowering them, yeah.
People are being empowered. That's the most important thing.
I think that's right.
Joe, I was at a meeting at Power Association Northern California a couple of days ago with a colleague, and the vice president of marketing for SunPower, Tom Stars, was talking about distributed generation and the integration of renewables, and he said The problem is utilities' views towards the adoption and integration of DG, and the solution is utilities' views towards the adoption and integration of DG. In other words, basically the problem and the solution were one and the same. That it's all about how the utilities are accepting or adopting to these changes.
Right.
Give us some national perspective on what's going on with utilities.
If I think I follow your question, is how utilities across the country adopting to DG?
You can answer any question you want.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry. So I will. I'll reform that. So I think I'd go back and take it to a point that President Peavy started with, that utilities across the country are very, very different. They have obviously other different regulatory environments, but they operate in they are very different businesses depending on the assets they have or have not. To say somebody like NRG is a utility in the same way that you say that Southern California Edison or PG&E is a utility is to fundamentally misunderstand what businesses they're
Right.
in. Underneath the umbrella of the utility business, you really have two separate businesses. You have the generation side of the business, which is manufacturing of electrons, and then you have T&D, which is transmission distribution, that is the grid that one of the earlier speakers today talked about as being invaluable. How utilities are reacting to distributed generation, depends on what assets they have, what business they're in. Where you stand on an issue depends on where you sit to a large degree. So if you think about it from, if you're in the generation business, right, and you make your money on those generation assets in a competitive market or even on a rate recovery basis, you may react similar to how you are in Germany. The distributed generation, and in fact all central station solar renewables that come in the mid part of the day and then disappear in the second half of the day, they carve out a big part of the economics of those assets. And so we've got a system there on the generation side where we're adding capital to a system that exists and turns out the product today that we're all using. We're adding capital to that system, but decreasing the utilization of the existing asset base. Right? So what pressure does that put on a utility? It puts a significant amount of pressure on the utility and on the commissions that have set up their business models to allow them to recover that capital. And you're going to see, depending on what state you're in and what utility you're in, you're going to see very different reactions to distributed generation, solar in particular, and renewables. Here in California, the utilities, our three primary utilities, NRG and AES have generation here, but we're not talking about those. Most people don't know their names. People think Southern California Edison, PG&E, and SDG&E. Those businesses are primarily infrastructure businesses. We all get bills from them, but they essentially administer power acquisition from the wholesale market and distribution to all of us in these rooms. They don't have an earning interest in your energy consumption. Their earning interest is in the wire that connects to your home, that resilient grid that is absolutely necessary for any future model that we've been talking about here in this room. And so how they react here in California to distributed generation, they are economically agnostic to it. The way that it impacts them is through the rate design mechanism and the shifting of costs from one customer to the other, which ties back to then a longer debate around rate structures in the state of California. Mm-hmm. But you have to peel underneath the individual economics of any individual utility to understand what's in their best interest in the way they react. So.
Go ahead.
The only comment I would make on that, I mean, I could make several comments, but the one I would make is the following, that we at the California Public Utilities Commission have tried, at least I have tried to be a change agent, mm-hmm. a believer in many of the things that Rick said that lead to customer empowerment and choice and reduction in greenhouse gases. Those who know me know I'm very, very green in that regard. But one of the decisions that we handed down at the end toward the end of last year, saying that by 2020 we have to have in California 1.3 gigawatts of energy storage, I think could be a fundamental game changer over time and can break that umbilical cord between the utility and the customer at the, because you don't, if you have backup power, let's just do it in the commercial side for the moment.
Sure.
Commercial buildings and all, then you don't need, except at almost as an insurance policy, that grid connection any longer the way you still need it today. And I think that our setting forth a goal of 1.3 gigawatts or 1,300 megawatts of energy storage is going to produce, we hope, some of the drops in prices that we had with solar, that Rick described in solar, down, 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 down. And, you know, the solar use a placement of solar in Southern California, the first 3 months of this year is up 50% over what it was last year already. So, I mean, it's going on a faster trajectory than many thought. But storage can have an even more fundamental impact because, I mean, we all know we have sun for a certain number of hours every day, and if you could store some of that energy, then you don't have to have that grid connection. So, as nearly as much. It'll start probably on the commercial side and maybe governmental side, but I think it could very well spread and be a further radical changer in the structure of this industry over time. In this state, now it doesn't apply in Alabama, perhaps.
Right. You know, a couple of you have mentioned a company, NRG Energy. There was a rather extraordinary shareholder letter that the CEO wrote this year. I don't know if you saw this. I'd just like to just read a little bit of it because I think it gives a sense of some of what you're describing. Quote, what do Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, very successful but very distinct companies, have in common? They all provide products or services directly to the consumer which are deemed essential to the enrichment of their life experience day in and day out. This was David Crane. There's no Amazon, Apple, or Facebook, or Google in the American energy industry today. There's no energy company that relates to the American energy consumer by offering a comprehensive or seamless solution to the individual's energy needs. There's a few more of these that are still, well, I'm going to read them. I just think they're good. There's no energy company that connects with customers with their own energy generating potential. There's no energy company that enables the consumer to make their own energy choices. So, Rick, let me ask you, you're Google's energy guy. We look to Google for a lot of technology and innovation. Is there an unfulfilled role for an energy company like this? Is this what consumers need?
Well, I think what David's probably talking about is that, you know, in the past, people haven't, well, frankly, how do people here interact with their electricity? Most people actually probably look at their utility bill maybe once a month, and they pay it. And some utility bills are, you set up on auto pay and you don't even look at it. You don't even look at the bill. But now, people are starting to ask questions.
Can't understand the bill.
Well, that's another literacy of energy. I mean, people in this room probably know what a kilowatt hour, but most people probably look, what's
in this room.
What is that KWH? That must be misspelled. But people do want cost-effective electricity. They do want choice. They want choice on where they are able to source their power, and they want convenience. And some of the things that I think new technology can provide some of the solutions to those desires. So you can get choice. If you say I want to have renewable power, and many people are making that choice in the locations where it makes sense to put solar on my rooftop. A lot of that in the past, some of it's been driven by economics, but a lot of it's been driven. I really want to source my electricity in a sustainable way. Now, costs are such that you can do that at a lower price than your than your traditional electricity bill. So that's a great sales opportunity for businesses like Solar City. But convenience too. Like why can't I have power in my home when the power goes out if I have an EV in my garage? It's got a big battery there, or a battery that's been installed by Tesla and Solar City into my home.
Right.
Why can't I use that? And then there have been issues with trying to deploy some solar plus storage in residential locations. Or to what Commissioner Peavy said, maybe starting with commercial. If I have storage on site, I can reduce my demand charges, which is a significant portion of an electricity bill for commercial customers, and the fastest growing part compared to the energy portion. So reduce my costs, enable myself to use renewable power where I can. And resiliency, or I can actually make sure I've covered my electricity I own and can manage my own electricity. And there are devices too that can do this, technologies that can enable people to do this. They don't want to interact with their electricity bill. They don't want to know what a kilowatt hour is. I just want to know that I can do things easily. Oh, why don't you have a device that you can actually, you can change your HVAC settings from your phone sitting on your couch. You can be lazy. That's fine. That's good. It's convenient. And in the meantime, that device can manage your electricity in such a way that it's saving you money and can potentially provide load management back to a system that enables you to deploy more renewables onto that grid. So there's a lot of things that I think when David Crane talks about electricity or energy companies that can meet some of these needs, I think it's because of this, this rapid acceleration in the technology that's available, meeting some of the traditional customer needs that they haven't felt like in the energy industry they've been able to actually able to get. And economics are a critical piece here too. You can provide electricity and service to someone at lower cost, and you can potentially do that with some of these technology while providing services back to the grid, which is another interesting place where companies could spend time and effort. How do we solve some of the problems that the ISOs are facing while providing services or the desirable things that customers want: choice, cost, comfort, convenience, resilience.
T&D company.
So is everybody writing those things down that Google's going to come out with here?
These are things that any company should. These are actually what's interesting. These are things that utilities
Set it up to optimize it.
utilities could go do.
Yep.
And that's what David's talking about. He's like the utilities that he's, as he stated, haven't been doing this, but he's actively trying to participate in those markets and do those things and provide those services.
So can I ask, is there a student here that would be kind enough to bring us 4 little glasses of water? President Peavy, California has been pretty innovative, as you indicated. The commission last fall did this energy storage mandate. Look at this. Carl Bloomstein is bringing us water.
Grad
Look at
students.
this.
This is service thing.
Wow.
You're the
Thanks,
oldest grad
Carl.
student here, aren't you, Carl?
Oh, this is great.
A student of life.
Some of us students take longer to get it.
You only got 3 glasses though, but there's 4 of us here. This is the economics of scarcity when we have 3 glasses.
The drought's here.
It's an interesting experiment.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, President Peavy, you've been pretty innovative. You put in place, your commission put in place a storage mandate. You seem to have settled the net metering debate last year in California with legislation.
Seem to.
Well, we settled the net metering debate by policy decisions this spring, for the moment anyway. I think it's fair to say.
And other states are doing a lot of innovative things. You've mentioned some of this. We were talking earlier. I mean, I just note Texas is overhauling their ancillary services market. Minnesota has set a value of solar tariff. New York is shifting regulation to meet the needs of a more distributed, consumer-focused energy system. What else is California going to do? What are you going to do in your next six years, President Peavy?
Yeah, lie on a beach in Hawaii. Give advice to people like David Crane.
Well, but what would you like to see your commission do over the next 6 years?
I'd like to see us. I'd like to see the commission continue on the path it's on of stressing that you can't go wrong if you put consumers first.
Very
and
good.
try to empower customers to make effective choices across.
Yeah,
the
that's
board.
okay. You can clap for that. That's good.
Yeah.
You're
No,
all
but
consumers.
across the board. I mean, I think that as Jeff was reading off these comments of David Crane, David has this company called NRG that is all over the lot on every kind of product, and it's largely still a traditional generating company, isn't it?
Largest wholesale generator in the country.
See, so I mean, but he has this somewhat mystical view of being much more than that, which I applaud, and I know David pretty well. I mean, where we made a commitment with him, the Public Utilities Commission, to put in 200 fast charge, direct charging stations in the state of California for electric vehicles and 10,000 stubs in apartment houses, shopping centers, and all that kind of thing over the next 5 years. They're going about it a little slower than we hope, but it is happening, and that's to further create this electric vehicles, greenhouse gas reduction. The things I'd like to see most certainly in the next few years in California is further dramatic attention to climate change and greenhouse gas reduction and enhanced energy efficiency programs across the board that will only through that and the decarbonization of this sector can we get anywhere near the kind of society that you want to see in California or around the world in the next 20 years. And that's the thing that interests me the most, and what I've tried in the energy side to focus on in the last couple of years. Energy storage is just one piece of that. What we're hope to do, we put out and those of you who are economists or analysts in the room, I think will find this very, very attractive. We made a major decision just 6 weeks or so ago that the utilities, PG&E, Edison, SDG&E, have to provide all their customer usage data to researchers, the universities, with the proper non-disclosure agreements. And what was the motivation behind that? We want to be able to go much further in the usage of data and analysis to deal with climate change and energy efficiency and a whole host of other things, that data will unlock the ability of people in this room and many, many other researchers, many other places, to be able to see data that up to the, and make suggest policy choices and decisions from that has never happened before because that data has been proprietary. I think this is almost revolutionary in its longer term impact, I think, on this state and elsewhere. I have to say that the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has been providing that kind of data to UCLA's Institute of the Environment for the last several years. As a consequence of that institute there can tell you, if you assume that you make certain assumptions about the impacts of sea level rise and temperature change in the Los Angeles basin, you could see 20 years from now that place like Porter Ranch, for those from Southern California know where that is, or around the state, you're going to have a 5-degree increase in Fahrenheit. And it's going to be more like Phoenix, and if you want to live in Phoenix, then you'll be quite at home at Porter Ranch. On the other hand, Santa Monica and Venice and along the coast, the climate change will be about 0.5 degree at most. Now, there may be some sea level rise. There will be a compensating offset. But putting that aside, I mean, if you stop and think about that, really think about it for a minute, that is only going to make some of the other societal challenges that we have even greater, because who the hell wants to live in Porter Ranch at 5 degrees if you can live in Santa Monica at no change in temperature in terms of the economic justice and injustice of some of these other decisions. I mean, there's a huge, portrait here of things that can happen, but we're going down that road. I've talked too long on this.
No, President Peavy, your attention to climate change has been consistent during your tenure, and I don't know of many other PUC commissions throughout the rest of the country that have focused the way you have focused on that.
Well, I've been very blessed by the fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger, in all candor, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a tremendous believer in the problems of climate change and gave us all the support I could ever ask for at the PUC, and Jerry Brown has continued and even magnified much of that same policy focus and attention. And after he's reelected, he will spend the next 4 years even doing more in that regard, which I think is very reassuring.
So let me ask Joe a question. Joe, you consult to utilities, you work on a national level. Tell us, what changes are you seeing taking place elsewhere in the country? What utilities are adapting and changing? And maybe give us some perspective for California.
Gee, that's a great question. And as I said in my last set of comments, it really depends on what assets you have and how you think about it, what regulatory environments you participate in. And I think...
Can you all hear Joe? He's speaking a little soft. Speak up, Joe. No, speak a little louder.
My apologies.
Speak to them, not to me.
Sorry. Certainly. As I said earlier, it all depends on what assets you have and what environment you're in, what game you're playing. And so you think about David Crane at NRG, is doing fabulously interesting things, transitioning his company from the largest wholesale generator, probably one of the largest carbon emitters in the entire country, but trying to transition that entire company to be retail and consumer focused. Right? And so you're seeing them move aggressively in that. You're seeing the state of New York that, as President Peavy indicated, has come out with an extremely innovative potential regulatory model that would change what you expect from a utility, turning them from monopoly providers, whether coupled or decoupled in their energy ownership, to actually the marketplace to support what people would call a plug-and-play grid that would enable then all of the innovation at the other end of the meter that I think people are looking for. Texas is an interesting market. Texas is a market where you have separate wires companies. That's all they do. You never know their name as a customer because you have a direct energy retailer. You have the model that I think, if anybody was here in the morning, I think it was Ralph Calvinaugh's mother subscribed to, which she wanted to hedge her energy risk with a different energy product. She didn't really want to do that. That was the joke from the morning. It was a different energy product, but in Texas you can do that. They've got programs that are free nights and weekends. What you don't have there, and that's a purely libertarian type of market structure, one of the most advanced in the world actually, probably. You don't have a lot of the innovation that we're talking about driving in California. You don't have as much distributed generation. You don't have products and services at the other end of the meter, and that's because there's not as much incentive for that. It's just pure market to market, and people are stuck in are operating in the central station model. That's the lowest cost price of power. That's what they've decided they want to consume. There are some that want to take more renewables, more green power, but for the most part, they're not having the same kind of debates and interests in conversations we're having here. So you're seeing very different reactions in every different market, just depending on I think the regulatory framework that guides what people can and should do.
I would just make a footnote to that the third biggest state calls itself the Sunshine State. Now, you would think the Sunshine State would have a tremendous amount of solar, wouldn't you? They have very little solar.
Very little solar.
Very little solar. They believe in solar energy and distributed generation every place but Florida. The companies that operate and the commission that operates in Florida believes in exporting it everywhere else. They're a big player here in California, next era. They do a great job here. But back home, it's a totally different world. And that world is the traditional vertically integrated utility monopoly.
Yeah, and I would say to that, it depends on what it is you're trying to achieve. We've talked a lot about choice. We've talked a lot about what consumers want, whether it's choice in its environmental quality in their energy. For the most part, when you talk to the vast majority of consumers, ones who can't read their bill, they care about reliability. Does the light go on when I flip the switch? And is it cheap? Those are the things they care about. It's less than 20% of the population, maybe 5% of the population that actually, for lack of a better word, cares about all of the stuff that we're all so excited about. So I think that's actually it's an interesting point for us to think about, because it's hard to think, at least as I construct it, that we're going to move beyond that 10, 20% of real engagement. So as I think about the economic models and the utility models, here in California in particular, is if we move into a world where we have this dynamic energy future and 20% of our customers, 30%, leave the grid in some way and are self-sufficient in a way that I think everybody in this room will be really, really excited about. We still need that grid, and we still need the central station power for that other 70%. And so some of the questions that I think about is on a system basis, where are we moving? Where are we moving to? And what happens to the costs for everyone else that doesn't have a roof, that rents, that lives in an apartment building, you name it, doesn't have a high credit score and a nice big roof in a sunny spot.
That's right.
So,
But there's maybe one thing I would add is for those, the 70%, the 80% that want reliability and cost, what's interesting is some of the technology innovations that are happening today. Like I certainly applaud CPUC for putting forward the request for requiring 1,300 megawatts of storage. There are technology innovations that at the end of the day can get those customers to lower cost. And they get it to lower cost by providing services to the grid that enable them to have a lower cost overall. So there's demand management, there's load management, there's storage. Storage needs to come down the cost curve. It's not there yet.
Way down.
But that's, But it only starts by deploying it, getting operational experience, getting storage into the markets where it can then get financed. improving itself out. But I think that what's interesting is if you actually are providing some of these other elements to the grid that people may not care as much about, at the end point of all that is lower overall costs. There's places today where renewable power is cheaper than fossil power. It is cheaper. We as a company procure wind power in the Midwest. Why? It's cheaper, and you can sign up for 20 years, and you know it. There's certainly concerns about, well, how much renewable can you put onto the grid and still maintain that and still be, make sure that you're covering the load when it's required. But as cost curves have come down and will continue to come down, right now, you're hitting retail grid parity points in many states, but you're going to be driving further and further down in cost. So eventually, people will shift over. Someone could put solar on the rooftop today, not because they care about solar at all, but because it appears cheaper. My bill appears cheaper. So
I would stress the point that it appears cheaper.
yeah,
Right? It appears cheaper given the rate structures we have and the tax incentives we have.
true. Yes.
So I think it's a very big difference. So there is societally resources flowing to support that. And I think the thing that's important notion, at least as I think of it, again, from a system basis, is that the notion of grid parity as it's marketed is not quite right. Right? In terms of it's not actually parity to the grid. When you have rooftop solar panels on, you want to start up your air conditioner, you still need the grid for that surge power, that induction to make it work. You still need the grid to sell that power back. You still need the grid on a cloudy day in Central Station. So the notion of grid parity, as it's been measured and talked about, I believe is a misnomer. And so when people, again, talk about grid parity, they talk about the value of solar. I think one of the other ways to talk about it or think about it is also, what's the value of the grid? What would be the value, if somebody said, listen, I can take you off grid, but you got to put these kind of inverters in, you got to put $30,000 in the storage, you got to put solar panels 3x the size of your home and put a canopy out, and now you can be off grid. Or I can just run this wire to your house, and it's about 1/100th of the cost of what I just laid out. What do you want to do?
Yeah, I think the grid will be here for a long time. It provides a lot of critical services. At the very least, I think Commissioner Peavy mentioned, at the very least, it's an insurance policy on whatever generation you have. Getting self-generation to the last 95th percent, 100% in storage, it's relatively cost prohibitive, and it will be for a while to get that last bit. The connection to the grids is critical, and this is why I think this is a space of opportunity for utilities too. They're going to be connected to customers for a long time.
So go ahead, President Peavy.
Well, something that Joe said, I want you to everybody to think through all the implications of that. He said apparently cheaper, talking about solar, and that's true. And I think the way he meant it, and that's because of very positive government policies.
Yeah.
The investment tax credit at the federal level. We have solar in California big time on rooftops because the California Solar Initiative that started out as 1 million solar homes, Schwarzenegger wanted, and it came to the PUC. But we didn't use a feed-in tariff. Thank God we decided not to do a feed-in tariff, because I have way in the past in economist training, and I said, no, feed-in, not the way Germany, Spain, and Italy are doing it. We'll do an incentive program and try to bring down costs and incentivize this industry to be standalone when the step 10 arrives. But these are government programs, the energy storage, all these things. This is I think for our state, a very positive thing for government and the federal government with the ITC and the production tax credit for wind and all. One other point here. You say, 20% of people really follow this. I don't think that's accurate. I think many, many, many more Californians. This state is very sophisticated environmentally. Thank God, because of 40 or 50 years of attention to the environment and advocacy groups like the Environmental Defense Fund, NRDC, many others who have articulated so many of these things for so long. And I would use as an example, when we had Prop 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act, that was on an attempt to repeal it on the ballot, sponsored by, frankly, Texas oil companies, and the co-chair of the campaign against it, Tom Steyer. And I saw George Schultz in the room earlier. George Schultz, 62% of California voters said, no, we're not going in that direction.
They understood it.
That.
They understood it.
We're going the other way. When in 2001 and 2002 in this state we had the energy crisis, we wanted to reduce usage significantly in the summer months of residential users, 1/3 of Edison and PG&E customers reduced their usage. Now, they were given an economic incentive to do so, 20% off their bill, plus the savings they got by, we gave them a 20% bonus plus 20% reduction in their usage, reduced their bill, of course. And 1/3 of all residential users did that. They met that test. That was incredible. It's not 20%, 1/3. And another 1/3 didn't hit 20, but got over 10. And that's an incredible inclusionary effort by Californians, and this state has an environmental ethos that I think is very, very significant, and I just want to see us continue it and build on it in the years ahead, because I want to see us help the rest of this planet do a better job. Otherwise, we're screwed, to put it bluntly.
Did you all want to clap again there, President Stevens? Let's get back to technology for a little bit, gentlemen. I want to turn this over to the audience and let them ask you some questions, but I have a couple left I want to get to. You know, Rick, I asked you to be on this panel to provide some perspective for innovation companies, right? And new technologies. And of course, Google is one of those companies. In fact, you know, I think people are aware of a lot of these things, if not the premier non-energy company in the energy space. Google's demonstrated its commitment to energy efficiency, renewable energy in its data centers. In 2010, FERC authorized Google to be a Category 1 seller of energy, which scared the hell out of the utilities.
Ivanpah?
Yes, they're investors in Ivanpah. In fact, they've invested about, and you're behind this, about $1 billion worth of renewable energy projects. You can clap for that too. For innovation, you got the Google Power Meter, something you tested a while back, and providing real-time energy to customers 7 years ago. We still don't do that with our smart meters. More recently, there was leaked news that Google is going to build software and hardware tools for utilities. And I also read a quote from a job posting. Google is looking for solutions that aim to fundamentally change the world of power. You guys are putting your money where your mouth is. So it's no wonder that utilities are somewhat concerned. And now you've spent $3.2 billion, as President Peavy pointed out, on a company, smart thermostat. There's no way in the world that you could justify that cost based upon sales. So tell me, is it all about advertising? What else is going to happen here going forward, Rick?
Well, Google does make the bulk of our money from advertising, but we're a company that actually, I think I'm blessed to work at a company that's willing to take a look at innovative technologies and new industries and think about what are ways that we can apply the passion of our employees, the technology innovation that we have into some of these industries. So things like wearable electronics, right? We decide, yeah, let's go and try and do that. Self-driving cars, which can have enormous benefits for populations. It can have enormous energy savings benefits. It can have enormous benefits for safety for people. So there's a lot of industries or areas that we'll go into because we think that there's a lot of they're ripe for innovation and can have a lot of benefits. I mean, within energy, we have a history of energy fueling our infrastructure. So people ask me, well, why is Google investing in renewable energy projects? That's not core to your business.
All right.
And I say, well, you know, Google as a company delivers answers to over 100 billion searches a month. We upload 6 billion hours of video every month to users, over 1 billion users. This is we provide a lot of services to a large audience. What does that rely on? That relies fundamentally on an electricity infrastructure. And that infrastructure has to be pretty sophisticated to deliver those answers and deliver your cat video, whatever video you want to watch, in milliseconds. And so we thought about it very hard, like how do we do that in the most efficient way, economically and sustainably, and what are the approaches that we would go through? So we focus on things like efficiency. Efficiency, as you brought up, is something that we've been fanatics about for our lifetime, for over 15 years now. We have some of the most efficient data centers in the world. We have people who think day and night about how to make them more efficient. And then efficiency is one big thing. You reduce the amount that you're using. The other step that we take is, well, for whatever you do use, let's see if we can source it from renewable sources. And we do that in thinking about the economics of it too. But as a company that's focused on sustainability as one of our kind of core values, we really want to make sure that we're doing the right thing there. So we've went out and we've procured over 1 gigawatt of renewable power for our own operations. But then we thought, well, what else can we do? Well, we happen to have a balance sheet with cash, and we have the ability to invest in things. And why don't we try? We put what was at the time the largest corporate solar array on our campus, but at 1.7 megawatts. That was huge back then. Now it's not that big. But we thought, what are things that we can do to really help scale? So investing in large renewable energy projects. And we've put over $1 billion in capital into projects that have over 2 gigawatts of capacity. That's a Hoover Dam's worth of capacity. So lots of things. And I think as we look at the energy industry, we thought, well, is there some experience that we can take from all the things that we've been thinking about electricity in our data centers, efficiency and how do we manage electricity? And maybe there's things that we can apply to help enable the industry to move forward even further. And some of these things could be very enabling for utilities to take part in this adaptation, this transition into a time where people are more concerned about the sources of their power, but they really want also additional services and choice and resiliency and all those things. And now that some technologies have come to the point where they can become cost effective, some are appearing cost effective, but really that's through subsidies that in effect can go away, and still at the retail level with no subsidies, there's places where solar can make sense. Hawaii, it can make sense.
So do utilities need to evolve in order to allow companies like Google to move into the marketplace with new technologies, new opportunities for customers? Do you need to see changes on the part of the utility structure, or not?
I don't know if it's utilities need to evolve, but some of the structures do need to evolve. There are certain, as Joe was pointing out, there's certain, depending on where you are, there's certain structures that allow technologies to enter a market. The example is like even just demand response. There are certain market structures that have allowed that to really become a sizable market. And in PJM on the eastern part of the country, that's the largest DR market, I believe, in the world at like 14 gigawatts or something like that. And why? It's because they have demand response in a capacity market. You can sign up. You can say, all right, I'm going to deliver you that capacity. When you want that power, I'll deliver it to you by turning things off. Pretty simple idea. And it's by far one of the most cost-effective ways to do that. But there are other structures that other places where that doesn't work, where there's not a capacity market for that. And it's under some threat right now too, because the energy part of that is under threat, but that could expand into capacity, which would be a problem because that's a very cost-effective way of providing power. It's a very flexible way of doing it. And there are utilities who probably don't like that because if they're primarily generators, then it lowers the cost for the power they produce. So some of the structures I think would need to change to allow some of the amazing technology innovations to enter the market and to help utilities, potentially, do things for their customers that they haven't been able to do in the past.
So, thank you, Rick. So let me do this. The students that have the microphones, if you'd stand, I'm going to ask one more question, and what we're going to do then is turn it over to the audience. You can find people that are going to speak. Let me just ask my one question, and we've got about 10 or 12 minutes left. There is a threat that I've noticed to utilities, at least in this state, and I'd like each of you to give me a brief comment on it, if you will. Back in 2002, the California legislature passed a law that allowed for community choice aggregation. We've seen an effort at the ballot box with a proposition where one utility spent a lot of money. That didn't go. So now we have legislation that's pending in the state to try and basically put the end to community choice aggregation. This is a form of, if you will, municipalization, and it seems to be an enormous threat. Is this the tip of the iceberg? Is there something here? Is there something around community choice aggregation that utilities fear? Because we haven't seen a whole lot of it. We've seen a successful case up in Marin County. Sonoma's gotten started. We're trying to do this now in Silicon Valley. And I think there's a number of other cities that have looked at it. President Peavy, what's your thought? Community choice aggregation represent a needed change?
Well, I think it's just another example of what is an erosion of what had been historic utility monopoly. I mean, that's all it comes down to. People have sought to have greater, in the case of Marin, they wanted to have a greener product, they felt, than the utility was providing, PG&E being the utility. PG&E is the cleanest big utility in America. I mean, it's 20% nuclear, which is no greenhouse gas emissions, 20% hydro, which is no greenhouse gas emissions, and now over 20% renewables. But nonetheless, the people there chose to community choice aggregation. Sonoma County's doing a similar thing. There may be some others. If the utility model of the future, and this is where I think Joe and I would be in 100% agreement, is a distribution and transmission company, then I don't think that whether it's community choice aggregation or some other form of municipalization or muni light, what have you, makes all that much of a difference, if that is the future. But I think that the many utility executives don't want to see that, and they want to maintain a linkage to the customer, and they feel that community choice aggregation would be a threat to do that, even though they continue to do the billing in Marin County and in Sonoma County and so forth.
Joe, you
Oh, no, I think that's absolutely
because other
right.
states are doing this, not just California.
Yeah, and community
It's
choice aggregation, I'm sure everybody knows what it is but a group, a municipality can get together and decide that they want to source their power from somebody other than PG&E or the other.
and run their
utility.
own programs.
And run their own programs. And so, but they still require the use of the utilities wires, and they still pay for the use of the utilities wires.
Right.
So from an economics point of view, the utilities in California are today, they're exactly neutral to that prospect. It does not impact their economics one way or the other, if it's implemented effectively and the contracts are unwound the right way. So I think it does come down to, as President Peavy said, that it really comes down to the desire to potentially have a connection with a customer so that they can participate in the sorts of new technologies, the new developments, in the new world that Rick's been describing. So I think how you navigate that through that is really for the utilities and the commissions, both here in California and across the country, to decide fundamentally what business they're in and where the utility stops and where the market begins. And I think you need to get real clarity on that, because I think if you can be very good about that, you can see you can see a lot of flourishing innovation at the consumer end of the grid. I think you'll see a great deal of it. And it may be too much to ask for the utilities to be the ones to provide that. And that might be okay, as long as as long as the part of the business that is a monopoly, that is the wires, it's a natural monopoly, it's not just a regulatory monopoly, then that could be okay.
Okay. Rick, I don't know if you want to comment on that. We
I'll
go to
add just
question.
some very brief.
Go ahead.
Choice leads to innovation. So if you have options for choice, it can lead to innovation. And the provision of some of the information that can allow you to then provide services around that information. We've always been a big proponent of making people's electricity usage data more transparent to them. And that's something they should own, and they should be willing, if they want to, share it with other people, other firms, other companies that may be able to provide services back to them that they want. I think that level of information sharing and the ability to have choice, that's what can make innovation flourish. And that could be within the utilities bailiwick. That could be something that they do, or third party does. It could be anyone.
Okay. So thank you, gentlemen. So let's open it up. I'm looking for my students. You got microphones? Go
Hi,
ahead.
my
take it to
name is-
somebody. All right. Please identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Bruce Carney. I'm from Carbon Free Mountain View, a citizens group in favor of community choice aggregation.
Oh.
But that's not what I was going to ask about. I grew up in a time that was sometimes called the space age and sometimes called the atomic age. The U.S. no longer has a space vehicle. We borrow the Russians. What about atomic power? Diablo Canyon comes up for relicensing in 2024. Will it or should it be relicensed?
Well, I'm not sure that's really a question for this panel. President Peavy, you want to? Maybe he's asking you.
No, I don't want to get into that.
So I'm gonna decline that one just because we're trying to talk about the need for utilities to evolve. So let's see if we can stay on topic with questions. I see another standing gentleman with a microphone. I have microphones over here too, correct? Whoever has one, stand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Tom Faust. I'm from Marin. We have community choice aggregation. and everyone in Marin just absolutely loves it. Well, and I'm going to bring it to President Peavy's thing where consumers should have a choice, and in Spain you have 49.1% of the energy that goes on the grid is renewables. In Spain, in Portugal, it's 74%. Utilities are going to block and obstruct every single way because they have their vested infrastructure in fossil fuels. In Stanford, you have Mark Jacobson that has the Solutions Project.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, sir, please ask your question.
Well, my question is, why not, if consumers have their choice, why can't President Peavy bring the PUC to bring the Solutions Project, Mark Jacobson's 100% renewables, or at least 80% renewables by 2030? It's absolutely feasible. It's technically feasible. All it is, will the PUC push it? You say you want to make everyone die happy and make the world a better place. Mark Jacobson's plan and the Solutions Project is the way to go.
All right, you should have brought up a Cal professor, not a Stanford
okay,
professor.
let me just say very briefly the following. On this general subject, I mean, we face a very practical problem today. San Onofre nuclear power plant was closed down 2 years ago, now a year ago. 2,200 megawatts, 24/7 power, just 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 90% of the time. We have to replace that power. That's our responsibility, along with the California Independent System Operator and the Energy Commission, the Air Board, and so forth. We at the PUC set a policy that 50% of the replacement power has to come from what we call preferred resources. That's energy efficiency, demand response, and distributed generation. I don't think any place in the world has faced such a large need to replace so much power so quickly and made the commitment to do it with that non-fossil at least 50%. I hope we can go past that, but we're at least we set the policy through our long-term procurement plan and all to go to at least 50%. I think it's a very bold step. I welcome any input from others as to how you can go above that, and Mr. Josephson is certainly welcome to come and see us at the Public Utilities Commission.
So let me look over here. Stand. I can't. The lights are so hard to see. We have someone in the
Jeff,
back.
they gave me the microphone.
Please identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm a recent Stanford alum, and this is mostly for President Peavy. Do you see change to the rate structure being part of the next form of net metering?
Yes. Yes. Well, there was legislation passed last year. Jeff referred to it, and we have a challenge to sort that out over this year and next year, and a very big consideration will be regarding net energy metering, and also whether and if the answer is yes, we should have a fixed charge, a modest fixed charge. Then how would that impact all this? And we are going through the throes of that right now in hearings at the PUC.
Okay. I heard Commissioner Grunig. I can't see you down
I know,
there.
that's what they said. This is the softball question of energy efficiency, that for climate change, we know we have to increase its uptake, even in California, 2 to 3 times. And we've had very successful programs with our utilities, but looking forward, I don't hear as much discussion when we talk about the utility business model of the future of, one, how are we going to get to the levels of energy efficiency that we need to, in terms of what that may mean for how we're thinking of energy efficiency. And then the other part is, if we do get to those levels, we're really talking about a major decrease in utility loads, which could be more disruptive than the distributed generation. So I'm interested in any perspectives that you have about how you see energy efficiency fitting into either just the future generally and what that could be to really get up to the types of uptake we need, but then what does it mean for the utility business model?
Sure. I'll start that. I think I'll start with the utility business model. And again, we're here in California, we're talking about energy efficiency policy here in California. I think the important thing to come back to is where utilities make money today and they don't. And it's a bit of a misconception that utilities here in California are actually wedded to kilowatt hour sales. The utilities in California are a pass-through mechanism, so that all that happens to the utility model is that they need to manage the contracts that they're in on our collective behalf so that they're not purchasing as much power from the outside, and then that goes through to the degree they have fixed costs in the wires. The charges per kilowatt hour consumed go up, or the fixed charge goes up. But its energy efficiency is not actually a threat to the utility model here in California. They're what we call decoupled from load. So that, I guess that was to be the first point. Does that answer your, at least part of the question?
Rick, did you want to add anything?
I would just, from a company perspective, obviously we're concerned with energy efficiency, and it's not just because it lets us have a smaller footprint. It's dollars, right? Using less energy to do more allows you to save money. So that doesn't have bearing on a utility rate structure that emphasizes or de-emphasizes efficiency, or whether it's decoupled or not. Just no matter where we are, whether we're in a decoupled region or we're not, we're going to be reducing as much as possible our demand. We hope very much that we'll continue to grow and need, we'll have a user population of 2 billion. That would be great. So our energy needs will continue to grow, but we're going to try and be as efficient as possible. One thing that I think Jeff maybe mentioned in the beginning was a challenge for utilities is that, they've actually seen load growth go negative for like the last 5 years or so. It's traditionally gone up, and now it's flattened, and in some cases gone negative. And that's because there was a recession, but load growth hasn't really come back, and efficiency is a big part of that. Demographic shifts as well. So it's a hard question for utilities that aren't in decoupled areas and how to deal with it.
Well, and I know time is over, but just one quick comment on energy efficiency that these two speakers didn't say. For the rest of the audience, Ms. Grunig used to be a Public Utilities Commissioner. Her and I worked on the first economic model of coming up to incentivize utilities so they could make money on investing in energy efficiency. We didn't do it very well. We made a lot of mistakes. That often happens. However, they made, like I think last year, $100 million or so on their energy, all of them combined, on their energy efficiency investments. That's giving an economic incentive to do energy efficiency. We're going to have to do much more in that regard, and just a little bit of propaganda. All day Tuesday in San Francisco in our auditorium, we're having the topic of energy efficiency and what new approaches should be taken, how should we go about this for the next 10 years and so forth will be the topic of the conversation all day long at a conference sponsored by the Public Utilities Commission on that very topic. Enough of the commercials.
That's okay. So I apologize that we are out of time, but I ask each of my panelists at the end if there's any final comment they'd like to make. Was there something you'd like to add that we didn't cover, or a specific takeaway you'd like to end with? Please.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for having me here. I've greatly enjoyed the discussion. For me, all of these topics and all these questions come back to the issue of what it is you're trying to solve, and some good hard thinking around the individual incentives and the economics you put in place to what we call the utility and what we call all of the other folks in the ecosystem.
Good.
It's not just a utility problem, it's an ecosystem problem.
The only thing I would add is that it's a very exciting time to be in government as a regulator. It's also a very exciting time to be a participant across the board. It's great to see so many people in this room. I hope you all go out of here energized and determined to do better, to make us all do better. In the months and years ahead. I would feel very good about that.
I guess I'll leave us with one thing, which was where I started, which the pace of technology innovation is rapid, and things are happening. And what I would hope is that other utility commissions like the CPUC are forward-thinking enough that they can allow rate structures or regulatory changes that allow some of those innovations to really help drive impacts in those electricity markets. And again, that could be whoever participates in those, utilities or third parties or what have you. But there's an enormous opportunity, as referenced in David Crane's letter, there's enormous opportunities in this space. And I think we can provide greater choice and more sustainable power to everyone in this country and everyone in the world, if we have the right regulatory structures to allow that, to have the right incentives in place.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today and for coming down here. Please join me in thanking our panelists.